you know, it's what's a Republican? What's a true conservative? And really what I want to tell you about is what I really truly believe in and what I believe Republicans and conservatives should believe in. Our responsibility as public officials is to one thing. As the governor of the state of Maine, my primary responsibility is to provide the goods and services necessary to run a state at the lowest possible costs to the ratepayers. And I take that very seriously, and that's been the modus operandi that I've had all along. Right as I speak to you tonight, we have hit some high marks in this state. We have the most amount of people working in our population in the history of our state. We have some of the lowest unemployment that we've seen in decades. We've had 5,400 new employers since 2014 come to the state of Maine. There's 8,000 more employers in the state of Maine than when I came here in 2010, when I was elected in 2010. We've created jobs, but the areas in which I believe is very important, in a time when we had high taxes, regulations, they're killing regulations, red tape that was killing us, and we were losing manufacturing jobs. Over the last 8 years, we sustained 51,000 manufacturing jobs. We have not lost. Despite the fact some of our mills have closed, paper mills have closed, we've not only got them sold and reopened, we've had new industries coming in that are manufacturing. So we are heading in the right direction. Our population is growing. Believe it or not, state of Maine's population is at a historical high. We have in-migration. 13 out of 16 counties have an increase in population over the last 2 years. The per capita income is growing higher than the national average. We're at 4.2%. We are on the map. Our per capita income, while it's below New Hampshire, which is the highest in America, I will tell you, could be a competitor to New Hampshire. And the reason it could be is because New Hampshire is pretty smart. They figured out, instead of having a three-legged stool to run their government, they have a pogo stick. It's very, very efficient. They can bounce around very quickly. And when I say a pogo stick, they have one tax. It's a property tax. Maine, we have a three-legged stool. It doesn't do very well. We have a property tax, which is very high. We have an income tax, which is very high. And we have a sales tax that's very competitive. Now, if we were smart, and if the Republicans would have worked together the last 8 years, we would not have an income tax. We lowered the income tax, but Maine does not need an income tax. What Maine needs is a little higher sales tax, get rid of the income tax, and there's only 803,000 people in the state of Maine paying an income tax. 803,000 out of 1.3 million people are paying an income tax. This summer, between May and September, we had 45 million people visit Maine. Increase the sales tax, let them pay for it, give it back to Mainers and let them spend it and enjoy the summers like the people from out of state do. But free is expensive to somebody. Free is expensive to somebody. And usually, the one who pays is the hard-working Mainers. So I really believe that the Republicans, the conservatives have it right. You pay as you go, you help those who want to help themselves, and you treat people the way you want to be treated. So with that, I'm going to go and introduce my good friend and someone who has a lot of knowledge about what needs to happen, in particular the energy world in the state of Maine. And if people would be listening, instead of paying 14 cents a kilowatt hour today, we'd be in the single digits. And I'm telling you, I don't care who wants to debate me on this issue. I have studied it. I have worked with Jim, I've worked with Maine. I see Larry Dunphy in the back, who's another person who is excellent in energy. If they would start listening and stop thinking about solar and wind as the save-all of the world, because it is not, until we have a way to store large amounts of electricity and use it when we need it rather than when we produce it, we are always going to have high energy costs. There are answers to our problems. Hydro is a great answer. Quebec has proven it. The West Coast has proven it. The TVA has proven it. Hydro really works. It's 24 hours a day. You can shut it down or you can start it up. Wind, you got to use it when the wind blows. And until you can have an ability to store electricity and use it when you need it, we're faced with Maine. Right now in Maine, we have a power plant in Rumford, Maine. It generates electricity for 3.2 cents. It works 12% of the time because we have so much wind and solar that when their wind and solar is making electricity, we have to shut it down. It's down more than it's up. It's down 88% of the time, but then we have to pay a capacity price, and so we have to pay them for being there. How sinful is that? When you have a state that is a relatively poor state, while we are getting better, we are still considered a pretty poor state. We're the oldest state in America, and we need to not only attract young people, but when they're here, we can't let them get away. So every college kid in America, or in Maine, beware. I've got the guards, I'm not going to let you out of the state. But another thing, and I will turn it over with this. I put up a bill, and I'm going to urge the young college Republicans tonight to really think seriously about this, because I think it's going to go a long way to saving the state of Maine long term. As I said earlier, we're the oldest state in the Union. We're 44 years, 7 months, as of the last reading, which was in 17, the end of 2017. The youngest state in America is Utah, a little under 29 years of age. That's the disparity. So I believe that if we, because our house is in order now, we've got a big surplus, and we're borrowing money at 1.5%, we should invest in interest-free loans to our kids. Give them interest-free loans, the state picks up the interest rate. Now follow me on this. Then you tie it to their working. If they leave the state and don't stay here, they got to pay back with interest. But if they stay and work in Maine, you go to the employer and say, if you pay off the principal, we'll give you a dollar for dollar reduction in your corporate tax.
Yes, brilliant.
Now, kids they work hard, they get an education. Instead of paying back student loans for 10 years, they invest their money in housing, in cars, and hopefully babies. Because we need young people. I'll tell you, the reason I am so strong for Jim LaBrecque is because of what his opponent did back in 2012 and what the Democratic Party did to the lady sitting in this room, Nikki Farnham, who was an exemplary state senator, did a wonderful job, and they went after her like I've never seen them go until the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. It was just disgusting. And they say that I am not politically correct. Well, I live in a world with Democrats, and they are not politically correct. And with that, folks, the candidate for the Senate from this area, which I believe needs to send the doctor back to doctoring and out of public policy, because he's horrible at it. Jim LaBrecque.
Then I just want to explain about who I am, where I came from. I'm going to be 65 in a couple months, and that's me heading out to school. Went to a Catholic school in Chisholm, Maine, part of J, and you can see it was in the days back when you had milk milk brought to a big family in great big jugs, and you had storm windows and stuff. And a lot of people think I was big into baseball, but I wasn't. I had 5 sisters, so I needed to carry a bat with me at all times. When I was 10, that was in 1964, my brother ended up going in the service, and I used these slides I pulled from a slide presentation. In fact, I gave the governor many years ago. That shows how much more efficient we are, but we use more energy. Greater efficiencies lead to more energy use. So this ended up showing how, just imagine how poor the passenger mile is for, back in those days. Today, the energy per passenger mile flown is a fraction of what it was. But do we use more fuel today or less? We use more because it's cheaper. We're more efficient. You look at TVs today. They're more efficient, so what do they have? Everybody has 1 or 2 in their own room, and they're everywhere. You can't look anywhere today without seeing 16 of them. So, anyways, I grew up in the days when close families all get around the radio and listen to our favorite story. And, DHS wasn't around then. If it was, I would have got caught smoking and massaging myself here. And you could get away with things back then, right? No. I grew up, I started driving a farm tractor on the farm at 5 years old, and when I was about 8 or 9, that was my favorite toy right here, Doodlebug. And I ride my bike all the way into town to get a book on how a carburetor works or how an electrical system works, and I would come and work all night. My mother would come out in her bathrobe and grab me by the ear at midnight and say, "You get to bed, boy," and I'd be back out at 5 the next morning trying to get it going. In the newspaper a couple weeks ago, top of the state section, says, "Dems publicize old GOP criminal records."
Yep.
Right? And so I said, well, I'm going to check out my opponent. And lo and behold, this I like. You didn't see this yet, did you, Governor? Yeah, see, there's the beaver, and then I'm saying Beaver Gate for 200, Alex, and that's LaBrecque here, and then Gratwick says much about nothing for 1,000, Alex. See, I don't know how long you had to run for politics before you got your picture on the paper like that, but I've been 2 weeks. So. I did some research, and as the governor says, the candidate back then, Nikki Farnham, was attacked. They made up lies. See, at least the stuff I bring up is verified and backed up. For instance, Dr. Gratwick's criminal record, Class E criminal record, is bona fide, and I have a copy of the court order here. Okay, I'll show you. But back then, Bangor Daily News, back in 2012, we need our lawmakers. They held a big press conference. I don't think the Bangor Daily News would do that for Republicans, but we need a lawmaker making laws, not running from them or thinking they are above them, said Ruffner, one of the organizers of the press conference. Bangor voters deserve to know why Nikki Farnham thinks she can have it both ways. As far as I can tell, either she doesn't know the law or doesn't care about the law. Either way, Bangor voters should be concerned. Well, I'm going to show you something here in a minute. Remember, either she doesn't know the law or doesn't want to follow the law. You watch and see what we show here in a minute. Gratwick says, the evidence I've seen against Farnham is pretty compelling, Gratwick added. If this is allowed to stand, it's going to create an increasing criticism about our government system. If the people who make the laws don't have to obey the laws, what kind of a message does that send? But Nikki Farnham was exonerated by, the claims that the Dems made against her, and then that was in the paper, and then the following weekend, Dems have a full-page ad saying she was guilty, right? In the Bangor Daily News, put that in, after the story they wrote about she was exonerated, and they allowed it. He said he didn't know he was breaking the law and would law when he took the traps, but willingly paid the fine after he was cited for disturbing traps, which is a Class E crime. by the Maine Warden Service. He said the warden returned the traps to their owners. Well, didn't Gratwick have a mother when growing up? He took the traps and the police, the officials had to take them back. My mother would have called that stealing. Would you vote for him if he stole your kid's bicycle? That's not a criminal, that's not a criminal offense. Stealing, tampering with traps is a criminal offense, but not stealing bikes. Would you vote for Gratwick if he stole your kid's bike?
When he won back in 2012, and I confronted him about what they did to Nikki Farnham, because I still believe to this day, next to Brett Kavanaugh is the worst thing I've ever seen. It's the worst display of politicking I've ever seen. I went to him and I said, Senator, I will never be able to really sit down and work with you knowing that the type of campaigns you run. And this is what he said. Governor, I had nothing to do with that. That was the party who did it. So I said, but I didn't hear you come out against it.
Or say sorry.
Or say sorry, or say anything. He said you did not say anything. You just sat by and let it happen. And what Jim is saying here is so true. And I will tell you, in my way of looking at things, Nikki Farnham should have continued in the Senate because she is a far better woman than he is a human being.
Thank you. The end result was Gratwick was convicted of a Class E crime and trying to minimize it because the judge only fined him $238. Doesn't matter. It's a Class E crime. The Democrats were looking for criminals. Well, you saw my ad. Class E is the lowest criminal offense akin to things like prostitution. That's a Class E crime. Now, Gratwick caught me at the gubernatorial race debate down at the Civic Center the other day, and he said, you're lying about me. I'm not a criminal. And I said, you have to argue that with the judge. I'm just a refrigerator man. So he says, you don't know what that's about. I says, well, does it matter what kind of a criminal you are to run for politics? He said, I got as low as he's ever seen anybody go. I said, no, I'm not as low as you guys went. You Democrats went and used lies against Nikki. I'm using court documents. That's not low. Those are facts. So I just want to make that clear. Now, in all, for Gratwick, because he couldn't earn his seat, they know he's no good, but they want him in there. They ended up having to buy his seat for $500,000 and play every dirty game you can imagine. He's no good. And the Democrats that support him are no good. I can play it either way. The governor knows that I've got two sides. You know, I was a Golden Gloves fighter back in school, and then I was elected in my senior class as the friendliest guy at Mount Blue. Right? But play it either way. Either I can play it that way, or I can play it this way. I'm going to give the Democrats an opportunity to start cleaning up their game, but you need the forum to be able to do it. So, solution number one, an act mandating municipalities open access to their facilities. So, for instance, here at the City Hall in Bangor, they open up their facilities for debates, and then they have to air them. Now, that gives an opportunity for the public to participate and air things out, and then have to bring up facts. And then you're challenged right there, and it's all on camera, so that the newspapers can't fudge these things like they always do. An act terminating PAC money from local and state races. All right? And then number three, an act to terminate clean election. They were so desperate, the Democrats, to get a solar bill through that they, Gratwick and did some awful things that were in violation of state statute and local ordinances. And his buddy Tom Saviello, who supported him, violated two major constitutions and then a joint rule. They lost. The governor vetoed a solar bill. They lost. They couldn't override it. So immediately, Saviello puts the bill in. the next session. The law says, the rules say you can't put the bill back in that just got vetoed, you have to wait for the next legislature. But they put it in anyways. Okay? Now, they put in a bill as an emergency. The second session is only for emergencies. Emergencies is defined as for the necessity of the preservation of peace, health, and safety. What the heck how you monitor a solar panel have to do with our constitutional, authority? Nothing. Okay? The next thing is that was Tom Seviello that put that bill in, and he's a senator. It's a bill to raise money from one class of people, those that don't have solar panels, to give to another class of people. The Obamacare Act, which was defined as a tax because you were compelled to pay and you couldn't back out of it, and the benefit didn't have to come to you, that was a tax. So, did Gratwick do anything to help me fight this? This whole thing was a lawsuit I was preparing to bring, and when they got wind of it, and they saw what I had put together, the legal people, then they dropped the bill. 100% of the time, the Democrats vote lockstep. And then when they don't, they get blackballed. So we need somebody down there that can fight this kind of corruption. And Governor, do I have a reputation of being a good fighter?
Yes, you do. Could I
Yep.
just say one
Oh,
more thing?
absolutely.
Just to put in perspective, something that Jim said, and I really think you need to think about this. And I think it's a very, very serious issue. In 2012, Gratwick spent, through the PAC money, $245,000 for one Senate district in this region to fight against one candidate. In 2010, 2 years before that, I ran for governor with 7 people in the primary, statewide run, and I spent $189,000.
Wow.
So keep that in perspective, because that's pretty serious stuff. And not one time, as Jim said, that out of that $245,000 that was spent against Nikki Farnham, was there a kind word said.
I'm gonna fight it. It's either Jim, the hardcore guy, or Jim, let's be reasonable, and it's up to them. And if you put me in there, those 3 bills I talked about were gonna be my first 3 bills I'm gonna be putting in. So I really want to thank you for coming today. It's a good showing. I want to thank Mark Wellman for the tremendous amount of work, and I want to thank Mike here for putting together this fine show up here. And Governor, you're the best.